So next we have Act 1, Scene 1 of the play, The Merchant of Venice. And in this scene, we have three main characters, Antonio, Salarino, and Solenio. Salarino and Solenio are good friends of Antonio. So Antonio says, "In sooth, I know not why I am so sad. It wearies me. You say it wearies you. But how I caught it, found it, or came by it, what stuff it's made of, whereof it is born, I am to learn." So he says, in reality, truly, he says, I know not why I am so sad. He doesn't know the reason for his sadness. So he's feeling really melancholy, and he tells his friends that he doesn't know the reason why he's so sad. And he says his sadness wearies him, it tires him. And because he appears tired, his friends are also tired. So it wearies them also. And he continues, how I caught it, found it, or came by it, what stuff it's made of, whereof it's born, I am to learn. So he says he doesn't know how he caught this sadness, how it found him, or how it entered his mind. What is the nature? What is the proper reason for his sadness? How was it? How did it start? He doesn't know any of this, but he's feeling sad. So he says he is to learn the from where the sadness started. And such a want with sadness makes of me that I have much ado to know myself. So because of the heaviness on his mind, he says he is like a wantwit. He cannot use his intelligence, right? And he cannot use his intelligence to, know himself at that moment. And Salarino says, your mind is tossing on the ocean. There were your argosies with portly sail like signors and rich burghers on the flood, or as it were, the pageants of the sea, do overpeer the petty traffickers that curtsy to them, do them reverence as they fly by them with their woven wings. So Salarino tries to find a reason for Antonio's sadness, and Salarino thinks that Antonio's sadness is present because his mind is on the ocean. So Antonio is a merchant, and he trades, right? He trades with many cities across the world, and all his goods are carried in ships, and these ships are tossing on the ocean. As the waves rise and fall, the ships are being tossed on the ocean. They're sailing through on the ocean. And Saladino says that the ships, the argosies of Antonio, are sailing with portly sail. Portly means fat. When the wind blows into the ship sail, the sail balloons, so it looks fat. So the ships with portly sail, and these ships of Antonio's, they're so huge, like Salarino compares them to signors. Signors are rich people, signors and rich burghers on the flood, or as it were, the pageants of the sea. So these ships of Antonio look like rich people, right? Rich people because they eat a lot, they have, portly look, they have plump, uh, they are portly, right? So, and these ships of Antonios are like pageants on the sea. A pageant is a festival, right? So they have colorful flags, they're painted in very bright colors. So these ships of Antonios are very, they're quite magnificent to look at. And these ships of Antonios overpeer the petty traffickers. The petty traffickers are the small ships. So they are sailing also on the ocean. And these huge ships of Antonios look down, do over peer. They peer means to look. They look down on the smaller ships of other merchants, and these smaller ships curtsy to them. They bow to them, and they do the ships of Antonio reverence. They show respect to the mighty and proud ships of Antonio as Antonio's ships fly by them with their woven wings. Woven wings refers to the sails, the huge sails of Antonio's ships. Solenio, the other friend, also tries to find a reason for Antonio's sadness. Just as Salarino said, you are worried about your ships which are there on the ocean, that is why you are sad. Solenio, his other friend, also tries to find a reason for Antonio's sadness. So Solenio says, believe me, sir, had I such venture forth, the better part of my affections would be with my hopes abroad. So Solenio says that if he were Antonio, if he had such ventures, if he had such uh, plans, ventures on the oceans, if he had such ships on the ocean, then most of his thoughts, most of his affections would be with the ships, those ships which are sailing abroad. So it's natural for a person to think of his wealth. So Solenio thinks that Antonio's mind is, tossing on the ocean with his ships. So uh, uh, Solenio continues, I should be still plucking the grass to know where sits the wind. So uh, he would be so worried about his ships, says Solenio, that he would pluck the grass and he would hold it to the wind. And in the and by the direction of in which the grass bent, he would know the direction of the wind. So he would think that his ships are going in that particular direction in which the wind is blowing. He would pluck the grass to know where sits the wind, peering in maps for ports and piers and roads, and every object that might make me fear misfortune to my ventures, out of doubt would make me sad. So he would peer in maps, he would look into maps and to find where the ports are, you look in maps to find where the piers. Piers are the harbors, and you look in maps to find where the roads, the goods will travel on. That is, the the cargo will travel on, and whatever makes him think of any misfortune to his cargo, to his ships. So he says, out of doubt, those dangers would make him sad. So Solenio thinks that Antonio is sad because his mind is with his, uh, you know, with his merchandise. So Salarino continues, uh, again trying to give a reason for Antonio's sadness. He says, Salarino says, my wind cooling my broth would blow me to an ague when I thought what harm a wind too great might do at sea. So if Salarino says, if he had a bowl of broth is soup, and he blew on the soup, when he just thinks of the breath that has cooled his soup, and when he thinks, and that wind, that breath of his, would make him think of the wind, a powerful storm, powerful wind which causes a storm on the sea. So when he when he thinks of this powerful storm, it would blow him to an ague. He would become feverish, right? So just cooling his broth, cooling his soup, would make him feel feverish because he would immediately think of a powerful wind on the sea, on the ocean, which would cause misfortune to his ships. So Salarino continues, I should not see the sandy hourglass run, but I should think of shallows and of flats, and see my wealthy Andrew docked in sand, wailing her high tops lower than her ribs. So he says he would not see his sandy hourglass. In those days, the time was kept by an hourglass. An hourglass had sand in it. So if uh, he were only to look at the sand in the hourglass, he would immediately think of shallows. Shallows are the parts of the ocean where the ocean is not so deep. So, if a huge ship sails into the shallows or into the flats, that is again where the sand is pretty near the surface of the water, if the ship uh, sails into the shallows and flats, then the wealthy ship named Andrew and would be immediately, immured. It would be caught in the sand and it would topple, it would fall over, and the highest mast would come lower than the ribs. It would come lower than the hull of the ship, and there it would lie till it rotted away. So, just to look at the sandy hourglass would make a person think of all these dangers that are present on for a sailing ship which is carrying merchandise. So he continues, should I go to church and see the holy edifice of stone and not bethink me straight of dangerous rocks, which, touching but my gentle vessel's side, would scatter all her spices on the stream, and robing the waters with my sails, silks, and in a word, but even now worth this and now worth nothing. So he says, suppose he went to church and there he sees the stone cross and there he sees the stone altar. So the moment he thinks of stone, of either a stone cross or a stone altar in the church, uh, he would immediately think of dangerous rocks which would cause great harm to his ships. So, if these ships were just touched by these dangerous rocks, then there would be a hole in the side of the ship, and all the cargo which is made up of spices and silks, okay, all this cargo would be scattered on the ocean, and the silks would clothe the roaring waters. So, and he says, uh, it would be worth something, but now it is worth nothing. Once the rocks, you know, uh, placed a hole in the side of the ship. Shall I have the thought to think on this, and shall I lack the thought that such a thing chance would make me sad? So he continues, shall I have the thought to think on it? So would I just think of this, and would I not feel sad if this were to happen? If this were to happen, it is a chance. But men are so constructed that most of their personality is with their wealth. So if a person fears any misfortune to his fortune, then he would become sad. So both Salarino and Selenio are saying that Antonio is feeling sad because he's thinking of his merchandise, right? But tell me not. I know Antonio is sad to think upon his merchandise. So Selenio says uh, that he thinks that Antonio is sad because he's thinking of his merchandise. So Antonio says, believe me, no, I thank my fortune for it. My ventures are not in one bottom trusted, nor to one place, nor is my whole estate upon the fortune of this present year. Therefore, my merchandise makes me not sad, he says. So Antonio says No, that is not the reason. And he says that his, ships, they're not, there's not just one ship, there are many ships. And each ship is going to a different place. So, and his whole fortune doesn't depend on the income of this present year. So his whole fortune is safe. Even if he loses one ship or maybe even two, he will still have enough to see him through. So he says that his merchandise doesn't make him sad. Selenio, Selenio offers another reason why Antonio could be sad. He says, why? Then you are in love. So love, falling in love makes a person naturally sad and melancholy. Antonio says 5-5 means no, no. So Selenio says, not in love neither. Then let us say you're sad because you're not merry. So he says, let us say that you're feeling sad only because you're not merry, only because you're not happy. And it was easy for you to laugh and leap and say you're merry because you're not sad. And so he says, it would be easy for you, Antonio, to laugh and jump and say you're merry because you're not sad. So there's no particular reason why you're feeling sad. So you might as well say that you're sad because you're not merry. And it will be as easy for you to say you're merry as to say you're not sad. Okay, so